Now, African national borders are afflicted by a multitude of troubles that straddle villages or even communities. Border disputes have been a reality on the continent through millennia. Africa certainly has its own peculiar set of problems. Today, close to 100 active border disputes exist across the continent. Rising nationalism, population, and environmental pressure mean that the situation is likely to get worse. There have been calls for an army of indigenous peace practitioners to work closely with available Pan-Africanist leaders and statesmen to douse and resolve tensions. But is that feasible? Some Africans have little hope. Here's World of Africa special report on Africa's feuding neighbours.
Despite efforts by various stakeholders to establish a peaceful Africa, armed conflicts continue in parts of the continent. Many of the current conflicts are driven by prospects of political power or financial gain, with armed groups fighting to acquire valuable mineral resources, assert their ideology, or address grievances. The recent flare-ups is in Central Africa. The animosity in this region is between nations that have been silent enemies until the claws came out recently. The war in the DRC is one of Africa's deadliest. Among the several armed groups are the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda. Rwanda and Burundi, two small neighboring countries in East Central Africa, have eyed each other with mistrust since 2015. Along with the dissidents, tens of thousands of Burundians fled to neighboring countries to escape violence and unrest. Many went to Rwanda, but some are now returning home. Presidents of both countries now say they want good relations, and now Rwanda is edging towards a war with its large northern neighbor, the Congo, as Kivu remains the province under bombardment.
Le Rwanda a en réalité des velléités expansionnistes.
This context of aggression and occupation of territories in North Kivu is perpetrated by the so-called M23 terrorist group, which has proven support in men and logistics of Rwanda.
Let's have mercy on these people. Let's stop the war and start dialogue. We cannot start with dialogue and then stop the war. No. We have to stop the war first, then begin the dialogue.
In East Africa, there are tensions between a number of countries. Dispute between Kenya and Uganda over a round rock crammed with corrugated metal shacks which rises out of Lake Victoria and whose deep waters that surround it are rich with fish, the Migingo Island. Migingo Island covers less than half a football pitch. According to the Ugandan police, more than 500 people live in less than 2,000 square meters area. The rock island, with its poorly constructed huts, a tiny port, some bars, a brothel and an open-air casino, is heavily contested by Kenya and Uganda, as both claim ownership.
This is Kenya. They are telling us not to put the flag here and rather have it on the other island because they claim the island is theirs. What should we do?
The reason I came here was that a long time ago in 2006, there were lots of people and fish was in abundance. My friends who were based here used to come back home with a lot of goodies, and that's what drew me to come work here.
From the east to the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt have recently agreed to resume negotiations to resolve their decade-long complex dispute over the Grand Renaissance Dam hydropower project in the Horn of Africa. The Grand Renaissance Dam is being constructed by Ethiopia on the River Nile. The Nile, Africa's longest river, has been at the center of a decades-long complex dispute involving several countries that are dependent on the river's waters. Despite previous talks, the point of contention hasn't changed. The Sahel region has seen its share of bickering neighbors. Armed conflicts in Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Chad, Mali, Niger, and Nigeria all worsened in 2019. The security challenges are linked to the rise of violent extremism and the proliferation of armed non-state groups, such as Boko Haram, which has spread from Nigeria across the lake to the Chad region. In North Africa, boundary disputes and contested territories are rife, including the Moroccan claims over Spanish territories of Ceuta and Melilla. There is the long-lasting Morocco and Mauritania struggle against the Polisario front, while Libya and Algeria have intervened in favor of the Saharan National Liberation Movement. Algeria and Morocco accuse each other of harboring militants and condoning arms smuggling. Libya appears to claim about 32,000 square kilometers that apparently is under Algerian control. After a brutal civil war, South Sudan declared its independence from Sudan in 2011. However, tensions persisted over natural resources, specifically access to the oil fields in the newly independent South. The borders between Sudan and South Sudan were officially erected when South Sudan took independence in 2011. A year later, Sudan and South Sudan descended into war over the disputed oil-rich area Pantu or Hedjlich, which lies on their border. In 2017, Somaliland held its fifth peaceful election since it declared independence from Somalia in 1991. Despite meeting the international criteria for statehood, including having a demarcated territory, a population, and a legitimate government, Somaliland remains unrecognized. But there is a presence of extremist groups like the Al-Shabaab, whose terror has seeped through the borders into neighboring countries like Kenya. However, relations between Kenya and Somalia have deteriorated in recent years. In December 2020, Mogadishu cut off diplomatic ties and accused Nairobi of meddling in its internal affairs after Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta hosted the political leadership from Somaliland, a breakaway state that Somalia's central government does not recognize.
It should instead see the decision of the court as an opportunity to strengthen the relationship of the two countries and the collaboration of their neighboring people. Somalia did not choose to be a neighbor with Kenya, but it was the willing of the Almighty God, so that we are forced to live as peaceful neighbors. Somalia was committed to that forever and welcomes it now.
Southern Africa has its own set of disputes. The contestation between Namibia and South Africa over the Orange River has been described as one of the deadliest boundary disputes in the world. There are tensions between Swaziland and South Africa. At least 24 countries have sent soldiers to support Mozambique in its fight against insurgents in northern Cabo Delgado province. Mozambique's civil war rumbles on. The big struggles now are political, about money, the causes of war, who can fight, and if the gas project can resume.
Right now things are a little bit more controlled. I would say things are improving. Yeah, if we compare to the moments that the situation took place, the attack, to now, I would say things are better now. Because people can move, we can do everything, we can go to school, we can buy wherever we want. So things are okay now.
Commendably, the African Union has been committed to an audacious border program since 2007. This may go down as one of the most significant legal events on the continent. The declaration demands an Africa-wide exercise to demarcate international land and maritime boundaries. The complete delimitation and demarcation of Africa is a Herculean task. We are talking about an area of approximately 6.1 million square kilometers and 28,000 miles of international boundaries.
The militarization of the African continent, it's true. 5 coups in less than 2 years. It gives the impression that Africa is going back to the 70s, when military coups were legion. This is absolutely unacceptable. To say that it is external interference, I think that is taking things too far. There are intrinsic problems, there are problems of governance, there are perhaps difficulties, certainly, but we should not cast blame on others. I believe that we must assume responsibility and solve our problems ourselves.